Greg, Allison, Laura, Marcus, and Brad. 5 former casino employees, each with a motive, each with a plan. They'd been betrayed by the system they once served, and now, together, they were about to pull off one of the most daring heists in Las Vegas history. But as their meticulously crafted scheme unfolded, secrets, tensions, and personal vendettas began to tear them apart from within. Trust would be tested, loyalty would be questioned, and not everyone would make it out alive. Would they escape with millions, or would their greed and grudges be their downfall? In the neon-lit heart of Las Vegas, beyond the dazzling lights and the endless stream of tourists pouring into the city's most iconic casinos, a group of ex-casino employees came together with one goal: to pull off the heist of a lifetime. The Vegas Strip, with its opulence and grandeur, hid a darker side, one that these former insiders had intimately experienced. For years, they had worked within the luxurious, fast-paced world of high-stakes gambling and exclusive resorts, but each had a personal story of betrayal, frustration, and resentment. Together, they had the knowledge and the skills necessary to pull off a daring heist, one that would set them up for life. At the center of the plan was Greg Davidson, known to his peers as the Brain. He had once been a floor supervisor at one of the most high-end casinos in the city, a job that, on the surface, seemed like the ultimate position. But beneath the veneer of prestige, Greg's story was far more complicated. He had spent years working tirelessly, climbing the ranks, only to see himself passed over for promotions time and time again. It was always someone else, someone younger, someone more polished, someone willing to play the game the casino demanded. The frustration had built up over the years, and with each snub, the idea of revenge began to take root in his mind. He knew the casino's operations like the back of his hand, and that knowledge would become his weapon. Greg had no shortage of resentment, but what set him apart was his ability to plan. He wasn't just angry, he was methodical, meticulous, and willing to take the risks needed to change his life. The casino's vault, the most secure place in the building, had long piqued his interest. He knew it held millions in cash, chips, and valuable items, all secured by layers of technology, guards, and time locks. But Greg believed it wasn't invincible. Over the years, he had picked up on the weaknesses in the system, the blind spots that no one seemed to notice. And now, with his crew, he had a plan that would exploit those very weaknesses. Joining him were 4 others, each with a personal story that drove them to this moment. Marcus was a former head of security, dismissed under suspicious circumstances. It was no secret that he had been disgruntled after an incident involving one of the casino's high-profile clients. The casino had claimed Marcus had failed to follow procedure, but the truth was murkier. The real reason for his firing was believed to be his refusal to turn a blind eye to the casino's shady dealings, particularly when it came to VIPs who often engaged in illicit activities. His dismissal had felt like a betrayal, and Marcus knew the ins and outs of the security system better than anyone. His expertise was invaluable in figuring out how to bypass the surveillance cameras, alarms, and laser sensors protecting the vault. Then there was Allison, an ex-cage manager who had spent years handling millions of dollars in cash. She had been forced out when the casino implemented a new corporate policy that downsized its financial operations. As someone who had once been trusted with the casino's money, Allison knew the flow of cash in and out of the vault, and more. Importantly, she knew how to manipulate the internal controls. Her access to the vault's digital systems was key to making the heist successful. However, as the planning progressed, it became clear that Allison had her own unresolved issues. Her bitterness toward the casino wasn't just about losing her job. It was about the way they had treated her, the way they had made her feel replaceable. Laura, the wild card of the group, was a former dealer with a criminal past that went back further than most of the group knew. She had worked at various casinos over the years, but it was her time dealing cards that had given her a deep understanding of how casinos operated. More importantly, Laura had a network of contacts, people on the fringes of the casino world, who could provide distractions, fake IDs, and more. But Laura wasn't just a skilled dealer. She also had a taste for revenge. She had once been involved in a personal scandal at one of the casinos, and after her abrupt firing, she'd harbored a deep grudge against the industry as a whole. The final member of the crew was Brad, a quiet man who had been working as a janitor at the casino for over a decade. No one had ever noticed him, except for Greg, who realized that Brad's position made him the perfect insider. Brad's unassuming nature allowed him to move through the casino without drawing attention. He had witnessed countless security breaches, system failures, and overlooked moments in his time cleaning the floors. Though Brad had always been in the background, he had a front-row seat to the secrets hidden beneath the glitzy surface of the casino world. And when Greg approached him with the plan, Brad didn't hesitate. For him, this was an opportunity to finally escape the monotony. The plan for the heist was simple yet intricate, designed to exploit the weaknesses Greg had carefully studied over the years. Every detail was accounted for, from the timing to the people involved. The team was well aware that one mistake could unravel everything, but Greg had a quiet confidence in his crew. He had chosen them for their skills, their insider knowledge, and above all, their shared desire for revenge against the casino that had wronged them all. However, as they dove deeper into the preparation, they began to realize that meticulous planning was only one piece of the puzzle. Execution was where everything would either fall apart or succeed. The casino's vault was the most secure facility in Las Vegas. Built into the heart of the casino, it housed millions in cash, chips, and valuables. The vault was protected by several layers of security, and the odds of successfully breaching it seemed slim. The first and most obvious line of defense was the time lock, a complex system that ensured the vault would remain closed unless accessed during specific hours. But this, Greg knew, was both a strength and a weakness. He understood how the lock functioned, and he had come up with a way to disable it temporarily, providing a small window of opportunity to access the vault. However, it wouldn't be easy. Allison's role in the plan was critical. As a former cage manager, she had worked with the vault's digital systems and knew the internal controls better than anyone else. Her job was to get into the casino's security system and disable any alarms, including the secondary locks that were controlled by biometric scans. It was a task that required precision. One slip-up, and the whole casino could be alerted. She would have to gain access to the vault's code remotely, bypassing multiple firewalls and security protocols. The key to this success lay in her understanding of the casino's operations, which she had once handled on a day-to-day basis. But Allison wasn't as confident as Greg believed. The deeper she got into the plan, the more she began to question the potential consequences. Her past with the casino wasn't just about being fired, it was about feeling betrayed. She had trusted the system and the people behind it, only to be discarded when they no longer had use for her. As she reviewed the system's weaknesses, a gnawing fear grew inside her. Would they really pull this off? Or was this plan doomed from the start? Marcus, the ex-security officer, had the most challenging job, disabling the casino's surveillance system. The cameras, motion detectors, and laser sensors that blanketed every inch of the building were a formidable obstacle. But Marcus had spent years working within the security department, and he knew how to get past the layers of surveillance. He had studied the guards' routines, their shifts, and the placement of the cameras, and he knew exactly where and when he could disable the monitoring system without raising suspicion. However, as the date of the heist approached, Marcus began to hesitate. His pride had been wounded when the casino had fired him, but over the years, he had grown attached to the place. He had made friends with some of the employees, and a small part of him didn't want to see it all burn down. This internal conflict made him second-guess every decision, and Greg began to notice that Marcus was less reliable than he had originally thought. Trust was vital in a heist like this, and Marcus's reluctance began to chip away at the team's unity. Laura, the ex-dealer, had the role of causing a distraction at the casino. She was tasked with creating enough chaos to divert attention from the vault area, giving the crew more time to work. As a dealer, Laura had spent years on the casino floor, observing the high rollers, the staff, and the flow of the casino's operations. She knew exactly how to make people feel special, how to manipulate them into focusing on her while the real work was happening in the background. But Laura was unpredictable. She had a way of pushing boundaries, often taking things too far. Her personal vendettas ran deeper than anyone realized. She had lost everything in her previous life, her career, her reputation, and her dignity. The casino's cold corporate atmosphere had driven her to the brink, and she didn't just want money. She wanted revenge. Laura was eager to see the casino crumble, but her chaotic nature made Greg nervous. Would she stick to the plan, or would she cause more trouble than they could handle? Brad, the janitor, was the quietest member of the crew, and perhaps the most dangerous. He had spent years moving unnoticed through the casino, observing the comings and goings of the employees, the guests, and the security teams. Brad knew how to get into places no one else could. He had a natural ability to blend in, making him the perfect inside man for a job like this. Greg had recruited him because of his unassuming nature. As the days leading up to the heist dwindled away, the team's initial excitement began to fade, replaced by mounting tension and growing distrust. What had started as a carefully orchestrated plan was now beginning to crack under the pressure. The once united group of ex-casino employees, bound by a shared desire for revenge and a common goal, now found themselves questioning their loyalty to each other. Greg watched this with a sense of growing unease, realizing that their unity was more fragile than he had initially thought. Allison, the former cage manager, had become increasingly distant. She was the one Greg had entrusted with the most critical part of the plan, disabling the alarms and bypassing the vault's security measures. But as the heist date drew nearer, Allison's confidence wavered. She had spent years handling millions of dollars at the casino. But now, as she studied the vault's internal systems, she found herself hesitating. The very same systems she once knew inside out now seemed impossibly complex. Every time she attempted to crack the code, she found new layers of encryption, new firewalls, and new roadblocks that made her question if they were in over their heads. What was meant to be a straightforward task became a stressful challenge. Allison had always been meticulous, but her growing doubt about whether she could really pull this off weighed heavily on her. The truth was, she had always been wary of Greg's plan. While she knew it could make them rich, she also understood the risks, both the legal ones and the personal ones. She had a lot to lose if things went wrong, and deep down, she began to wonder if her involvement in this heist was really worth the price. The more she got involved, the more she realized how deep the rabbit hole went, and how many ways it could all fall apart. Laura, the former dealer, was no better. Though she was tasked with creating the diversion, a critical role that would buy the team the time they needed, she seemed increasingly unpredictable. Her confidence in the plan was always a bit of a facade. Beneath her tough exterior, Laura was driven by a deep-seated anger and a thirst for revenge that didn't always align with the calculated risks of the heist. Her personal vendetta against the casino, the way they had discarded her after years of loyal service, clouded her judgment. At times, Greg sensed that Laura wasn't interested in the money as much as she was in seeing the casino crumble. She seemed willing to risk everything just for the satisfaction of destruction, and that reckless mentality was starting to seep into the planning. Her presence on the casino floor, designed to divert the attention of high rollers and security personnel, could easily escalate into chaos. Greg had counted on her ability to manipulate situations, but lately he wasn't so sure. She had started to behave erratically, taking too many risks and acting impulsively. The plan required precise timing and calculated moves, but Laura's temperament seemed to be growing wilder by the day. If she went off script, it could throw off everything. In the back of his mind, Greg feared that Laura might sabotage the whole operation without realizing it, all because of her deep emotional attachment to the idea of revenge. Marcus, the former head of security, was equally problematic. Greg had believed that Marcus's knowledge of the casino's security systems would be invaluable, but as the heist date approached, Marcus began to show signs of doubt. He had spent years working for the casino, and while he resented his dismissal, a small part of him still had connections to his old colleagues. His reluctance to go through with the heist started to become evident. Marcus often found himself questioning whether it was worth risking everything, his freedom, his reputation, and possibly his life, just to get back at an institution that had wronged him. His internal conflict had begun to bleed into his work, and Greg noticed that Marcus wasn't as sharp as he had been during the early planning stages. He was hesitating when it was time to disable security cameras and delay guards' rotations. His indecision was putting the entire plan at risk. Brad, the quiet janitor, had always been the wild card in the group. He had seamlessly integrated into the team, never drawing attention to himself, yet always knowing when and where to be. His role was to monitor the security guards, ensuring they were where they needed to be, and to keep the team informed of any movement or changes in the casino's layout. On paper, Brad seemed to be the most reliable member of the team, always calm, always prepared. But as the heist drew closer, Greg began to sense something unsettling in Brad's behavior. His calm exterior now seemed a bit too detached. Was Brad truly committed to the plan, or was he simply going through the motions, detached from the stakes of the situation? Greg's biggest fear was that Brad might have been hiding. The night of the heist had finally arrived, and the team gathered in the shadows, each member ready to take their place. There was no turning back now. The plan had been in motion for weeks, and every detail had been carefully rehearsed. But, as the hours slipped away and the casino came to life, it became clear that things were not as seamless as they had hoped. The nerves, the doubt, and the growing friction between the team members began to unravel the tight-knit facade they had built. Greg stood outside the casino, looking up at the towering structure that held their target. The bright lights flickered, casting a shadow over the place that had once been his world. He felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him, knowing that this was the moment of truth. If they succeeded, their lives would be changed forever. If they failed, they would be facing years behind bars. The tension in his chest was palpable, but he pushed it aside. There was no turning back. He had to trust his plan and his crew. Allison was already inside the casino, working from the shadows. As the former cage manager, her task was to disable the security systems that would trigger alarms or alert the authorities. She had spent the past few hours quietly working her way through the casino's back offices, bypassing firewalls and cracking codes to give the team a window of opportunity. But the deeper she got into the system, the more she felt the weight of her own fears. Her hands trembled as she typed, navigating through the intricate digital maze she once knew so well. The fear of failure clawed at her, threatening to derail everything she had worked for. Each time the system flashed an error message, a knot formed in her stomach. She couldn't afford to make a mistake, not tonight. In another part of the casino, Marcus was watching the security cameras. His job was to disable the surveillance system, ensuring that the team's every move went unnoticed. He had once been the head of security here, and he knew the layout better than anyone. But as he sat in front of the screens, his mind wandered. The adrenaline had kicked in, but it was now mixed with a sense of hesitation. Marcus had never doubted his ability to pull this off, until now. The faces of the people he had worked with for years flashed before his eyes. Was he really willing to tear down everything he had once been a part of? Could he live with the consequences if things went wrong? His hand hovered over the switch that would turn off the cameras, and for a moment, he hesitated. But then the weight of the plan hit him again. The moment passed, and he flicked the switch. Meanwhile, Laura was causing a scene on the casino floor. Her job was to create a distraction that would draw attention away from the vault area. She was supposed to stir up trouble, to make sure the high rollers and the security guards were too distracted to notice the team's movements. Laura had always thrived in the chaos of the casino floor. She was used to reading people, playing her role, and getting what she wanted. But tonight, something felt different. Her emotions ran high as she stepped into the role of the troublemaker. She could feel the tension in the air as the eyes of the casino staff followed her every move. A part of her was exhilarated, but another part felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. She was pushing too hard, trying to go beyond what Greg had asked her to do, and the distraction was escalating faster than she had planned. She could hear the murmurs of concern from the staff and saw the sudden change in the expressions of the patrons around her. Was she going too far? Back in the control room, Greg was watching it all unfold. The team was moving into place, but things weren't going as smoothly as he had imagined. The cameras were down, but there was still a sense of unease in the air. Marcus had turned off the surveillance, but the glitch in the system made him second-guess the plan. Allison had hit a snag in the code, leaving the alarm system half-enabled. Greg's heart raced. He had trusted the plan, but now he could feel the cracks in the foundation. The time was slipping away faster than he had anticipated. As the chaos in the casino floor grew, Laura was drawing more attention to herself than Greg had intended. Her actions were no longer subtle. She had gone beyond causing a distraction. She was actively engaging with the high rollers, sparking arguments, and creating conflicts that were starting to spill out of control. Greg could hear the echoes of her antics through his earpiece, and a wave of frustration hit him. This wasn't part of the plan. Laura's unpredictability was threatening to expose everything. He had to rein her in, but it was too late. The security team was already on the move, their attention diverted to the growing commotion on the floor. It was now or never. Greg signaled to the rest of the crew. The air in the casino was thick with tension, and for the first time since the heist had been set in motion, the group realized how much they were all at risk. The vault door was still locked, and the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the halls, growing louder with each passing second. Greg's mind raced as he looked at the team, knowing they had mere moments to make a decision. Fight for the vault, or retreat and save themselves before the casino's security closed in. The plan had fallen apart faster than anyone had anticipated, and now survival was the only thing that mattered. Greg's eyes flicked to Allison, who had been frantically trying to bypass the final security measures. She was still hunched over the terminal, her hands shaking as she stared at the screen, hoping for a miracle. But it was clear now that the system was beyond saving. The time lock had malfunctioned, and Allison's efforts to disable the final barriers had failed. She was no longer the confident, calculated expert Greg had relied on. Instead, she was a woman on the edge of panic. Every keystroke seemed to worsen the situation. "We have to go," Greg finally said, his voice low but firm. The words were like a slap in the face to everyone in the room. They had worked for weeks, months even, to get to this point. But the cold reality was undeniable. The heist was over before it had even begun. Marcus, who had been standing near the security room's monitoring equipment, shot Greg a look of disbelief. "What do you mean, go?" he asked, his voice tense. "We're so close. We can fix this. We've come too far." Greg shook his head, glancing at the doors as they continued to inch closer to the vault. "We're not getting into that vault. Not now. Not with the alarm system half on and Laura causing a scene in the casino. We need to bail now." Laura's voice crackled through the comms. "What the hell's going on? I'm trying to keep these people distracted, but you guys need to move faster." It was clear that Laura, caught in the frenzy of the chaos she had caused, was growing more desperate by the second. Her distraction had spiraled out of control, and she could feel the pressure of the guards' attention on her. But she was too far gone to retreat. She had already gone too far, and now in the back of her mind the idea of a clean escape seemed nearly impossible. Greg's order to leave seemed almost like an afterthought to her, drowned by her need for chaos. She had always been a loose cannon, and the idea of walking away without any kind of payoff left her fuming. But Greg knew that her continued presence was just adding fuel to the fire. He had no choice but to trust that she would eventually make her way out, one way or another. His biggest concern now was the silence coming from Brad. The janitor had been quiet throughout the entire ordeal, never saying a word. But now, in the face of impending danger, his silence felt almost like a warning. He had been the wild card from the start, and Greg had no idea what Brad was thinking. Brad didn't make a sound as the group moved quickly through the dimly lit corridors, heading toward the back exit. He was the last person Greg thought would bail out, but as the tension escalated, it was hard to say where his loyalty lay. Had he been an unwilling participant all along, playing the part of the silent observer until things got too hot to handle? Or had he simply realized that the stakes were too high and his best shot at survival lay in walking away from the group altogether? As they neared the service exit, Marcus hesitated again. "What about the money?" he asked, his voice laced, with frustration and disbelief. "We can't just leave it here." "We don't have a choice," Greg snapped. "We're not getting through that vault. We're not walking out with anything but our lives, so move." Greg led the charge, his heart pounding in his chest as he pushed forward with everything he had. There was no time for second-guessing, no room for error. They had to make it to the exit before security locked the doors. As they neared the back of the casino, Greg glanced over his shoulder. He was counting on the fact that they had all memorized the route. Every corner, every turn had been scouted, mapped, and rehearsed. But now, with the clock ticking down, there was no more planning, no more contingencies. It was all up to their ability to move fast and blend in. And then, as if on cue, the worst possible thing happened. The faint sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps. The casino's security had mobilized, and their response time had been faster than expected. The chaos on the casino floor had triggered an automatic lockdown, sealing the exits. The team's only route to freedom was blocked. Greg's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. Panic began to settle in. The vault wasn't their only target. Now getting out of the building alive was the only goal.